Yeah, we're expecting a pretty good turnout today, so thanks everyone for joining. If you want to chime in to the chat with any questions throughout the presentation today too, feel free to do that. You can take questions, any comments, ideas. If you see a question from somebody else, you can always try to answer theirs as well. And we'd love to hear from everybody too. Where's everybody tuning in from? So if you want to type in your club or your city or who you are, what your position is, any tryout experiences. I know people are really looking for some good feedback today from others in the industry who have uh, optimized their tryouts and evaluation processes over the years.
We got people coming in here. I'm gonna kick it off in just a second. We got Seth just joined us here. Excited to have you on today, Seth. Glad you were able to make it.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Um, and we got on our team here, we got there's two of us, Gabes, there's me and Gabe Malinsky, and then we got Zach, who's helping us run the webinar today, who's newer to our team, but amazing to have him here too. He was a Zach, you were a lacrosse player in college, right?
Yep, I played lacrosse at University of Kansas for 4 years and just graduated. So had a really great time playing MCLA lacrosse and keep playing because I just love the sport and love the game. So
Yeah, always nice to be able to extend that career into college and uh, great way to just meet a good group of people too, like-minded individuals typically. So that's great and glad to have Zach on for his first webinar experience too. Awesome. I'd say we can probably get started here. Skelly, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. Um, let's see. So the first thing we're going to go to today, or there's a couple different things. I think there's a slide for it, but so I'm Gabe Skelly. I've been here at Team Genius for 8 years. I've been working with lacrosse organizations all over North America for that whole time. In fact, I remember one of the first times I started working with lacrosse was with 3D lacrosse back in the day when they did just a kind of medium-sized tryout. It was like my first week here at Team Genius, and it's come a long ways from there. So excited to just keep seeing, the progression of lacrosse, the lacrosse world as it expands as a sport, and as we keep working with more and more lacrosse and helping organizations, get awesome tryouts, and then also share a lot of feedback with kids for in-season evals and camps and clinics and those kind of things. So. We've got Gabe Malinsky here, who's been on the team almost as long as me, and he's worked with a lot of lacrosse clubs as well. And he also is probably the biggest hockey expert on the team right now. So uh, we also mentioned we got Zach on here and did a little intro with him. And then we got Seth, who I've worked with for quite a few years now. It's going to be just sharing some things in a little while with his experience with Team Genius and just working with lacrosse and the junior PLL and other experiences he's got. We'll also be going through the most common used criteria that we see that organizations that run evaluations through Team Genius for lacrosse, tryout prep checklist that we've worked with for kind of keep refining years and years and years. That's just some good ideas to share for tryouts, and we'll share that with everybody after the webinar today. A peek into Team Genius. I think Malinsky will be showing that, and then Q&A for anybody who's got any questions. So, and as we're going through today, please feel free to add in any questions you've got about lacrosse and Team Genius or any of the other things that we're talking about. And I'd love to have people share their questions so we can go over those. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, just a quick intro to Team Genius after Skelly gave a great intro to the team that we have on here today. Team Genius has been around in some shape or form for around 10 years. It was initially involved in a soccer club here in Minnesota where we're based. Our co-founder created this for his son's soccer board. Just an easier way to get data to sync directly from an app to a backend dashboard where you can form teams or send feedback reports, that kind of thing. So that was really the initial reason for creating an app like Team Genius. And then since then, we've expanded our features to be able to communicate from coaches or those directors directly to the players, giving feedback and just being transparent throughout the tryout and end of season or in season evaluation process. Since we did start Team Genius 10 or so years ago, we've helped over 1,000 clubs, still work with about 700 of those sports clubs all throughout North America and the world. And in the lacrosse world specifically, we've evaluated well over 160,000 lacrosse athletes within our mobile app. And then there's Skelly and myself at convention this past year. Kind of bummed. I don't think LaxCon is a thing anymore, but we used to attend that too, and it was really fun to be able to meet in person with some of those people we are working with nowadays on Zoom, on a monthly basis. So, uh, yeah, some of the clubs we work with, just a few recognizable names in here. We work with everybody from, some of the largest lacrosse organizations throughout the country to the average city association who's just trying to give players a place to come and enjoy the game. So it's really I think the tool has become versatile enough to work with anybody really who evaluates over 100 players because that's where you're going to find the benefit. If you just evaluate 20 or so players, there's not any huge need for an automated tool that syncs data from an app to a back-end dashboard. Paper and pencil still work for some of those clubs, but for anybody who does evaluate over 100 players, that's typically who we're working with, and a lot of what we'll kind of give some tips on throughout the presentation today.
So
And yeah, go
welcome
ahead, Skelly.
to Seth here. Seth, we'll have you share some things in just a second here. But Seth is he's got 25 plus years of experience in youth, high school, and college lacrosse. Works with the PLL. Rising. I think Rising was actually the first one that I worked with 3D back in the day, back 8+ years ago. 3D lacrosse and former assistant coach at Wesleyan. And I know he's just got a lot of different things that he does and a lot of lacrosse experience. And we chatted about a lot of different things. So that'd be great to bring Seth on and just, talk a little bit about your experience in lacrosse and what you see, maybe things that are happening there good and changes that you like that are happening and those kind of things.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, guys, and excited to be here and share and help however I can. Um, yeah, I think for this call, I think what's most relevant is my time. I've been in club lacrosse space for you know 20 years now, and just to see how it's changed and the demands of the customer and the tryout process, as you said. Now we may have hundreds of kids trying out at some of our bigger clubs. Um, and also the demand, if you will, from the parent, the customer, for instant feedback is so real. And they want that feedback, like literally the moment, Johnny or Susie walks off the field. And so I think the ability to have that, to capture that, as we find that, when so and so makes the team, they're just thrilled and great. It's the ones that don't make the team that really want the feedback. And I think as teachers first, as coaches, that's something that we really should strive to give them. That's a fair question. I always say to my evaluators, like, that's a fair question that a parent can ask us is, why didn't my son make the team? How can he get better? So we need to be prepared to answer that. We can't just go because he wasn't good enough. Like that's a bad answer as a service provider. And so where we really started with you, Gabe, was I used to be at 3D lacrosse, before we morphed into 3-step sports.
Mhm.
But we were doing it with all of our individual markets, and I was running market tryouts, and then dabbled into our nation's best tryout process. And now, with the PLL, which to me is the hardest of all of those. The PLL Junior Championships is a 5th through 8th grade model or product, and players come from all over the country. And I think this year we had over 180 different clubs and 39 different states descend on our 4 tryout weekends. And we're evaluating this year. We evaluated, I think it was about 750 players. Over the course of a weekend. And so that's challenging. That's a big lift. And, that's why I bug you so much to help me get this thing working. And there's a lot of aspects, about that I could go into, but I don't know if you want to have any questions, you guys want to prompt me in some way or not, or just roll into how we use it.
Yeah. I think, Seth, can you tell us a bit about your tryout process or the typical tryout process before you use TeamGenius? Because maybe there's some people
Oh,
listening in
sure.
who are still using paper and pencil and maybe are a little bit hesitant to transition to something that's completely foreign to them.
Yeah, exactly. We would, the challenge would always be getting down every player's name and jersey and position, and trying to manage walk-ups, which you never want to deter as someone running tryouts. So, I was a lawyer for 20 years and I kind of feel that I'm a very organized person, and kind of conquered Excel spreadsheets at an early age. And so, like, I would have everything printed out and have the players, and the first challenge is, how many can you fit on a piece of paper for a coach to hand them on a clipboard? So, as I got older, it was less names because the font was too small. And so, like, if you have a tryout of 120 kids, you can't fit them on, that's like 5 sheets of paper. So just the functional management of paper and names and walk-ups, and becomes a disaster. And then do you decide to do them by, do you rate them by position? Do you rate them by team? Do you, so just, just the paperwork side of things becomes a real challenge. And so we did the best we could, and we would gather, all the data. I refined it over time in my time in clubs when we would have tryouts, and it became, essentially, kind of a 1, 2, 3. Doesn't matter what is 1 your best and 3 your worst, and then the comments. And it was really just the comment section was really important, because we would meet. I would round up my coaches. Now, this is a part that wasn't bad. I would round them up, and we'd all go to like a Buffalo Wild Wings or someplace where we could all sit down at a big table, and we'd sit there sometimes for 4 hours and go over every single player on every single team, and have a conclusion to whether that player made it. And if not, what were comments that we all could have. The other challenge is just getting enough manpower to have someone evaluate. It's hard. And I always took the approach that my evaluators had to be one of the team coaches and 3 independent people who didn't know a single person there. So it would be like a college coach, or it'd be a prep school coach who was not affiliated with our club. And then just having enough people not affiliated with your club who are willing to make the time to come, becomes difficult. Again, this was my belief, is that if everyone involved was already involved in the club and already knew every player, the new players wouldn't really feel like they're going to get a good shot. So my thought was, I need unaffiliated evaluators, because that's to me, as fair as it could be. But that paper process became just so challenging. Walk-ups, and then God forbid it rains, and now the paper's getting wet. And it really just, there's so many challenges that doesn't matter what you're doing. Those challenges are the same today. Paper, walk-up, who's going to evaluate, how you organize the paper, how small is the font, double-sided, single-sided, clipboards, pens or pencil, and just, there's a lot of little factors that you take for granted to do a paper tryout.
Yeah. Decision fatigue at its finest, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's great. And I think, you mentioned one thing that really stood out to me, a challenge that I think almost every club out there in all the different sports experiences, and that's finding evaluators who don't have that bias and who parents actually trust to give quality evaluations, not based on prior experience with players or their parents, but just, hey, how good is this player this year right now? And so I know that's probably one of those that people struggle with, that us on the Team Genius side haven't given a ton of ideas on. We've tried, like, we've told them what we've heard from other clubs, but what would you say to a person that is struggling to find somebody within their community to give, or to come and actually attend that evaluation as an evaluator?
Yeah. I mean, that's where you have to, it's all obviously, depending where you are, it could be more challenging, right? In Connecticut, Lacrosse dense area, there was always somebody that was around pretty much that wasn't directly affiliated with my club. And even someone who used to be affiliated with another club I was comfortable with, not maybe currently, but had been at another club, or is a coach at a prep school that does affiliate himself with another club because I felt comfortable enough that he was just going to evaluate, or she, just based on what they saw. And I think a lot of it has to do with your club culture. There are many clubs out here that the only people who evaluate your son or daughter are the existing coaches of that team, one of whom may be a parent. And so, I always felt that the tryout was a way to entice new customers into our club scene. And the way to do that is, again, to make it as fair to the new player as it is to the existing player. And so, yeah, it's relationship building. Don't be afraid to ask someone who might be, if you're in a youth space, don't be afraid to ask a number of high school coaches in the area. Just pick up the phone and ask. And as we find in our sport of lacrosse, at least, is that, most people, are willing to help as long as their schedule permits, with enough notice, and they kind of feel special. So it's kind of like, oh, you're going to be an evaluator. They feel good about it. And so they're willing to do it. Like it's maybe an ego thing to some degree, but that's why I would just ask away. And certainly college coaches, I would ask them to do it. You might have to pay them a little bit or give them a gift card or something, but it's worth it in the end.
Nice. Yeah, and I know we touch on that a bit with our tryout prep checklist, which we'll get to in a bit here. One other question I had for you, Seth, is obviously with any sort of technology nowadays, it seems like there's some hesitation from parents, from some old school coaches. What hesitations or difficulties maybe have you had while adopting Team Genius and bringing it to different processes throughout the club?
We actually didn't. I mean, I guess, Gabe hit our company when I first was aware of Team Genius at a good time, that we were really, because we were getting so big, and efficiencies were paramount. And certainly, today everyone is comfortable with that. With the phone, it's not really coming through. Everyone's comfortable with that, and that's what it's on. I use an iPad for my evaluators just because it makes it a little easier for them, because they're doing it for, they're on the field for many, many hours, multiple days. So to do it on the iPad's a little easier on their eyes. But we really did not have any holdback with technology. The challenge was always mine, is making sure they're aware of how it works in advance of the tryout. Like, don't have them show up and then try to teach them, but that's on me. And making sure that they know how to use it. And it's pretty, it's like anything. Once you use it a few minutes, you kind of figure it out. Like you don't have to spend a 2-week tutorial. It's pick it up, get a little help, fiddle around with it, and you figure out kind of what you need.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. It's not always any kind of technology takes a minute or two to figure out, but we have the resources, we have the training videos you can pass along to them. People can use the sample access key lax to get into the mobile app ahead of time to test out, the evaluation experience. And so I think the resources that we put together over the years have gotten it to a point where there's not a ton of training that, you as a director, a president, an admin, whatever, need to actually do ahead of an evaluation. You can just send those resources, and not every coach is going to watch them. That's very obvious, but the hope is that 50% do watch those training resources, and then that half can train the other half during the evaluation. So it's a really good way of putting it. Are there any kind of last or any tips that you can think of, Seth, that really you wish you knew 5 years ago going into, trying to adopt Team Genius or just run a more efficient and effective tryout?
I think the use of it, and I'll do it again as we, ramp up for 2026 and hope to break, 850, players to evaluate for this year's camp, is I continue on our end, because just we have so many players and so many to get through, is the less criteria, the better. It has to be a manageable number of criteria. I started out with we came up at some of our colleagues, James Leary and Logan Bobzine and all the old guard 3D guys, we had some amazing criteria that was just literally covered every single facet of the game for every position, which is really unrealistic in a tryout of our magnitude. It's not at a smaller one, but at our magnitude, it was. So really just refining that fine balance of enough criteria to thoroughly evaluate every player, but not burden the evaluator so that they end up skipping 6 criteria anyways and just go to the catch-all. Um, and so, and really just, and I think it just kind of has become more synced in on your end, but the audio comment tool was a game changer this year for us, and will probably be the way we will do, so much of our evaluations. Just the ability to talk into the iPad or phone, if you are using your phone, and provide those comments. Because for me, when we grade out, there will be, let's just say, 100 players that are going to be in the strike zone of who we're going to take, and we're taking 30, and the comments are the way, because the scores become very, condensed. And, I'm not going to take someone who, just because he has a 55.75 over someone that has a 54.85 over 3 days of evaluating. They're literally the same thing. And we have multiple evaluators, and everybody's scoring is a little different. So I need the comments. And so the audio comments really help in conjunction with our pre-filled comments. But the audio piece is really, I think, moving forward is going to be the way that I tell my coaches: just score him and then just talk.
Mm-hmm.
Tell
That's
me the
great.
story, what you see.
Yep. Yeah, those comments are so huge, especially the bubble players who, like you said, do have similar scores. It's tough to decide who's going to make that team. And sometimes it comes down to, hey, what positions are we looking for? And how good is this player at this skill versus this player who's better at this skill? And what are we really looking for on this club A team, right? What are you looking for on that best team? And so no, that's great and really, really good tips. I think something that we try to talk to a lot of our users on too is simplifying the tryout assessment. And then you can, like, for the end of season evaluation, that's where you can add 10 to 20 criteria if you really need to, right? So is there
Yeah,
anything
we didn't talk
yeah,
about it. I mean, we used to use it solely as an end of year evaluation tool, not a tryout tool. Now I use it as a tryout tool essentially. But yeah, the end of year, you can spend more time being more thoughtful on your criteria versus the evaluation criteria need to be a little leaner and much more efficient. But the end of year, and again, that's where it's like anything, is working with that club director is kind of what do they want their end of, being thoughtful about what do you want your message to the parent to be after the year, so that your criteria kind of will fold into what you want, how you want your club to evaluate. Some are very like very detailed, like lacrosse speed, quickness, and some are more generic, like, conceptual and effort and, teamwork, leadership stuff, and spending the time trying to figure out which one is more efficient for a fifth grader or a 10th grader is up to the club person. But having that thought beforehand, I think is worthwhile.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Seth, thank you for being here. That's all really great insight, and I think will be super helpful to everybody listening, whether it's live or in the recording afterwards.
Yeah,
We're going
I'd
to
be
shift.
happy to,
Yep.
I'd be happy to be a resource to anyone if they don't want to go through you guys and just want like a quote practical question. However you want to share my contact info, I'm happy to help.
Awesome. We'll plan to share your email out then in the follow-up email that goes out to those who registered. So
Awesome.
really appreciate your openness there. And we'll probably lean on you throughout the rest of this presentation too, just to answer any questions people do have or really chime in on some of the talking points that we have as well. So one more thing, we did just launch a poll. So if anybody does want to add some feedback to the poll, we'll maybe go through some of the takeaways on that at the end of the call here today. Next, we're going to get into the most commonly used criteria in lacrosse assessments within TeamGenius. Now, these are kind of a blend of tryouts and in-season evaluations, but I think there's some good things you can take away from this. Obviously, there's two different thought trains on how you're going to evaluate a player. Do you want to really get some subjective data, like scales of 0 to 5, how good is this player on shooting? Or do you want to go more the quantitative route and get things like 40-yard dash, pro agility shuffle, 1 mile run? I know Zach and I were talking about his 1 mile run in high school at his tryouts. And so we really see a wide variety of both of those things. But these are some of the top ones that we do see people using. Typically, the quantitative data points that you can see laid out there in the bottom right corner are not actually weighted into the player's final score. But if you do have one of those bubble players that Seth was talking about that rated really similarly on the overall score at the end of a tryout, you can then reference the quantitative data and say, well, this player ran a 1 mile run 2 minutes faster than this other player. Let's maybe take the player who's in better shape. So you can really start to use the weighting within TeamGenius to give yourself an accurate place to start and then reference that quantitative data. Some of those other subjective criteria we do see people using, they'll do shooting and then they can break it down into things like accuracy, on the run, speed, hitch and go, time and room. You can also get into dodging, ground balls, defense, odd number skills, face-offs. You can see these all laid out here, but all of that to say, as Seth alluded to, it's usually best to keep your criteria to between 3 and 5 criteria. Otherwise, you're going to scare away your evaluators. They're not going to want to come back next year and try to score 300 players on 10 different criteria. Keep it as simple as possible. As far as a scoring scale, most people are still using a 0 to 5 half point scoring scale, but we are seeing more people start to change to either named values. So something like, what team should this player be on? You can then score the player in shooting. This player, their shooting ability is A team level shooting, or B, C, or you can lay it out like a report card, A, B, C, D, F. Or you could do like above average, average, below average. So giving those score typically a numeric scale, an actual value so that the coach knows 5 is the best, or sometimes that gets confusing. Is 5 the best or is 1 the best? The named values really help to make that clear for a coach and evaluator who might be new to your tryout process. The last thing I'll mention too is we are seeing a lot of people change to a 1 to 6 or a 1 to 7 grading scale. Reason being, if you give them a scale of 0 to 10 to score on, you get a lot of 5s. A 0 to 6 or 0 to 7 kind of makes them choose, like, all right, is this player a 3 or a 4 or a 5? It's just maybe harder psychologically for that coach, that evaluator to find that middle score and makes them pick between 1 or 2. So yeah, just a couple of thoughts there and things that we're seeing as trends within the TeamGenius system. Next, we'll get into our tryout prep checklist. We will send this out afterwards, so don't feel like you have to screenshot anything. This will be sent out to everyone after the webinar.
I will go through this and yeah, exciting things that we've worked on for a long time here with the tryout prep checklist here. They put it on my side too. So number one, 1 to 3 months in advance, depending upon organization's schedule, you want to establish your tryout format, determine how and when your tryouts are going to be conducted, how many days it was going to last, and format they're going to take. So if you're going to have like a 1 day or a 2 day on different weekends, or maybe a 4 day over the course of a month, how you're going to run your tryouts. Next, identify the evaluation criteria you're going to use. So we kind of mentioned the criteria that are most commonly used in lacrosse organizations that work with us here. We certainly share those, and if you were to start a new account with TeamGenius, we have those set up as identifiers where you can have those criteria that are most common just kind of already available in your account. But identify those criteria that you're going to use and score players on. As Seth said, like in tryout scenarios, sometimes it's good to not do too many and to focus a little bit more on the actual comments that are put in. You want to reserve your fields, courts, or facilities depending on your organization's process. Ensure the facilities are reserved for the correct dates and times. Some organizations own their facilities. A lot of them rent or lease them. So important to make sure that you have those locked down for when you're running your tryouts and events. Prepare and send communication to parents. So important to alert parents of the tryout schedule, criteria, and expectations. Clear communication up front about pending cuts or fees can prevent post-tryout confusion. One of the nice things too, and I think we might have that later on too, but just even thinking about having what you guys are going to do internally, what a parent meeting might be the day of tryout. So open player registration. So give players several weeks to register for tryouts and select a time or date if more than one tryout session is being held. So we see that, pretty commonly that anywhere in that range. So 1 to 3 months, you might have a long tryout window where you can open up and register. You might even have communication before you're going to open the player trial. So I see that a lot where clubs might have, or for camps and combines that have the registration links out, or at least they know the dates that are going to open up for weeks or months beforehand. 3 to 6 weeks in advance, obtain your equipment. So ensure you've got cones, whistles, bibs, numbers, and all your sports-specific equipment that you need for tryouts. If you're going to use old school clipboards, pens, pencils, iPads or phones if you're doing electronic, also for evaluators. As we mentioned, if you're using paper and pen, you got to worry about weather and if, your ink's going to dry out and these kind of things. The nice thing about phones these days is, most of them are pretty much waterproof. So even if it were to rain, you can still score on your phone, which is kind of nice.
Done in the past.
Yeah. We used to have questions a lot about, hey, how can I hold, a umbrella while I'm scoring on my phone? It's like, well, how can you hold an umbrella while you're scoring on paper? It's not any easier, but most phones are pretty much waterproof now. So that's pretty nice. So next, recruit evaluators. So reach out to potential candidates who are qualified to evaluate players on specific criteria and skills. So we talked about that too. So maybe reach out to, high schools or colleges, or it's nice if you have sometimes outside evaluators. We have some organizations that will also use just like groups that have outside evaluators. But it's nice to have a less biased, I guess, evaluator grouping. Recruit volunteers. So contact parents and members of the organization who are available to help register athletes, hand out numbers, and help the overall execution of tryouts. A lot of parents, depending upon the organizations, they might have dibs where they have to do volunteer time, or they just want to help out. It could even be like if you're using TeamGenius, we have parents help out with taking pictures of players. So you add to the reports that way and to the tryouts that way, or a multitude of other things. But recruiting volunteers, I think the more you have, the better. And make sure you treat your volunteers well too, because they can be the lifeblood of some of these things running well and effectively. We could tryouts. So train those volunteers. So ensure all evaluators know how players are being evaluated and what scoring method is being used. If they're using evaluation software, all evaluators need to ensure they have basic training on the app and ideally have a chance to practice. So as Malinsky said too, one of the big things we worked for here a while ago was to create training guides and videos for coaches and evaluators so they can hopefully quickly get in a minute or two, watch those quick videos and score. We've got the Lax word as an access key. So if anybody wants to try out TeamGenius, they can get in and try out now. But that's a big thing, is making sure that people can use whatever tool you're going to use. If it's going to be any kind of app, that they know how to use it. I usually say if you can use Facebook or Instagram, you can use TeamGenius or other tools. Usually you just got to put a little bit of time into it. So assign volunteers to specific tasks. So make sure you have enough volunteers assigned to each area and each task. You might even have a volunteer where their role is to make sure the other volunteers are happy, to make sure that there's, water, food, coffee, if they need a charger or something, that they can have that. So a lot of different things you can do with volunteers. So train them. Expectations for all the participants during tryouts might need to be trained on specific tasks. Set up your evaluation software or scoring sheets. So customize evaluation forms or software to include specific skills players will be evaluated on, and what scoring scales and ranking systems evaluators will be using. Again, we've seen a lot of clubs, partially from these webinars, change to a 7-point scale, just to have a little bit less bias maybe in the scoring, and how they're going to have to think a little more about the top players versus the bubble players and how that goes. And then finalize your player registration. Prepare a final list of players per tryout session. After the registration deadline passes, ensure all necessary information is provided prior to tryouts. We do see some, on-site late check-in too, where people register the day of. If you guys allow that, something about how you're going to handle that, if it's going to be people walking up and if they can pay with a check, or if they got to, pay you some other way, if it's cash or through your registration system, and syncing everything there so it works well. So day of tryouts. So set up your athlete registration and check-in areas. Set up tables, chairs, bibs, athlete numbers, and check-in lists to make sure the process goes faster. Assign several volunteers to work at the check-in table and divide athletes by their last name to allow for more lines and less wait time. Separate line for walk-ups. Those who don't pre-register can also speed up the process. One of the things I've seen too is if you're going to be outside, having tents can be good. I actually helped work a large tryout here locally at one point, and all the parents dropped their kids off, and then a huge thunderstorm came through, and we were all huddling under these big tents they had, and thankfully they had tents that we could huddle under. So sometimes tents can be useful, even if you don't know you need them for the tryouts if you're running an outside tryout or camp or clinic. So set up volunteer and evaluation areas. Set aside a spot for evaluators and volunteers to place their personal items during the evaluation. Provide snacks and beverages to keep them happy and engaged through the event. If it's outside, I would also add in sunscreen and bug spray, because I've seen more than a couple events where there can be a lot of bugs, or personally, I like to wear a lot of sunscreen so I don't burn. So add those in there. Finalize and hand out your athlete list. So ensure evaluators are in the correct spots to evaluate specific skills and drills. So hand it out, let them know where they are. I've also seen, walkie-talkies being used. I've seen really big events where people use golf carts to get around. So knowing where people know where knowing that your people know where they need to be is important, and how you're going to communicate with them. Addressing volunteers with final instructions. Make sure each volunteer is confident in what they need to do and that they're in place before tryouts begin. And then here's a big one. So they're all big, but address parents and athletes. So before your tryouts, have maybe a parent meeting. It can be after they drop their kids off, or check them in right before you start going. Talk to the players and parents to ensure everyone knows the format and expectations for the day. Information as to how many players will make the teams can be shared at this time. It's also an opportunity for directors to tell parents and players if they are using evaluation software instead of paper forms. The advantages of electronic scoring can be shared, including the quickness and accuracy of results. Directors can explain to parents that because of the software, evaluators will be seen looking at their phones or iPads. This doesn't mean they aren't paying attention. This used to be a bigger thing than it is now. I think more people are used to technology. We actually have a video that I made a couple of years ago that a lot of clubs still send out, but it's for parents to say, hey, you get this club using TeamGenius or whatever technology. It's to hold better, faster tryouts, and they're going to be looking at their phones or devices a little bit. So I don't think it's as big of a thing as it was, but it's certainly something that you can address. So parents are like, hey, why are they looking at that instead of the pen and paper? So post tryouts, hopefully you had a successful tryouts, compile scores and rank players. If using an evaluation software, this will be done automatically and immediately. If using paper, collect scores from evaluators, enter the data into a spreadsheet to aggregate scores and determine player rankings. Assign players to teams. Whether drafting players or forming competitive teams, it's important to assign players to appropriate teams quickly. Sharing scoring data with coaches and board members to ensure proper team placement decisions are reached. I've seen this a couple of ways too. So just to go a little further on that one. So once you get all the details together, you could even still go to a Buffalo Wild Wings and pull up somebody's computer or a couple computers and share the relevant age grouping and show the aggregate scores along with comments. Or I'll see some clubs pull it up on Zoom. They might fire up a Zoom meeting just so they can share the data easily where everybody logs in, even if you're in person, and just see the scores and see the aggregate scores. And you can drill down and see how each player was scored by each coach. Or if you're in a place where you can show it up on a big TV, like maybe you're in a Buffalo Wild Wings or a Perkins or who knows what, throw it up on a TV if they've got one. So you can look at the scores and, do a real-time draft, and then you can communicate with the families right away afterwards. So that gets to the next one here. So it's communicate results to athletes and parents, determine how they're going to play, how players were cut off, if any, will be informed, and what information from evaluations will be shared. For those who made a team, share key information like schedules and uniform requirements. Determine next steps to begin the season. So I think Malinsky will show a little bit of that, but we have some easy automated ways to do that, some of that process. Respond to parents' questions related to team assignments and player performance. So inevitably, some parents will want to discuss their child's performance and team placement. By being prepared for this with easily accessible scoring data, player rankings on specific skills, and a summary of comments from evaluators, these conversations can be positive and beneficial. I would 2x that. Is it's nice to be able to pull up a player report and show how a player ranked within their team or their player pool on specific criteria and say, like, if the kid didn't make a top team, here's why. They weren't the top, they were on the lower end, and maybe even that's a good time to drill in and say, hey, we'll give you a free feedback report on things you could do better or something to make it a better experience. Or, parents at least can then know why their kid didn't make it instead of just saying, hey, they didn't make it, because that turn the because into something that's got a little more depth to it. And then last year, ask for feedback from evaluators, volunteers, athletes, and parents. After tryouts have ended, send out a survey or determine a format receiving feedback to get tips on what worked and what didn't during this year's tryouts, so those areas can be improved for the following season. So a lot of good stuff here. We just keep adding to it, changing it up as we go through the years, and we will send this out to anybody that wants. So just our tips for running effective tryouts.
I'm just gonna.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot there. Go ahead,
That
Seth.
was awesome. I mean, so many great things. I'll just say, and a real one, but kind of tongue in cheek is collect back the 270 tryout pennies that are now smelling terrible, and try to figure out if you're going to wash them in your home and how long they're going to sit on the floor in the laundry room before you wash them all, or just take them to a laundromat. As I learned to do later, it was way better. Collecting all those smelly pennies from a July 27th tryout and stuff like that. Oh, the worst.
I imagine the faster the better that you wash them and get that done with.
Yes.
You don't have
Yeah.
the smell would just keep expanding. So
Yep. Yep.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff.
Yeah, Seth, do you guys have something like this that you use year to year?
We do in our not at all this complex, but we do have like best practices within our kind of our 3D vertical. All the rest of our brands are kind of single brands, so they're more, they have their own style. But 3D, where it has multiple marketplaces, we've always shared like best practices and stuff like that. And the one that I'm surprised, and I will just tell you, not going to say names, but I have stepsons now. I've done it all through with my son. Have stepsons now, and how their club did none of the communication stuff shocked me, that they did not communicate with parents, pull everyone in a meeting, and while the stretching starts, one of the coaches or the lead director communicates with the parents like how the process is going to be, what they're going to do, and how it works. And shocks me that the communication piece will save you half the headaches that might come down the road if you communicate in advance well and at the event, like you have indicated in here.
Yep.
Yeah, no, this is great. We do share. So like I said, we do, but not this in depth.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I think this is a good starting point for a lot of clubs. And then copy paste this into your own sheet where you can change
Yeah.
some of this to fit your process. And then that person who's running tryouts next year is going to give you a big thank you and pat on the back for, being proactive and really helping the club. And a lot of these steps do get taken out if you do use Team Genius to, like, the evaluation criteria. I was just on a refresher training yesterday with a customer, and they mentioned they have no idea how they ran tryouts the year prior because the person left kind of on bad terms. And then
Yeah.
what we were able to do is go into their Team Genius tryout assessments, look at exactly how things were done last year, and just clone that. And they were set up just like that. And then they were able to make minor tweaks if they need to. So with that being said, we'll kind of transition into a quick demo. I know we're kind of running out of time here, but lots of really good stuff still to go through. So I know we do have some current users on the call here, but there's a couple people that did request to see a quick demo of Team Genius. If you do want a more in-depth demo, you can always reach out. We can talk one-on-one about your exact process and how that might be implemented within Team Genius. But this is the back end of the system we'll be going through here quickly today. If you do want to check out the mobile app, you can just download that on your phone or tablet, or go to eval.teamgenius.com and use the sample access key LAX, LAX, and that will bring you into a sample assessment so you can see what the evaluation experience would be like for your evaluators. But like I said, this is what an admin or a director who's actually setting up the evaluation process and then forming the teams would see. Everything really works top left down within your assessment. You're able to, as we've mentioned a couple times, customize those criteria you want the coaches to score players on. You can choose how you want to score them on a scale of 0 to 5, half point increments, full point increments, 0 to 10 or 0 to 7, like we've mentioned a couple times. You can also set up how many criteria you want to. You can easily change how much each of those weight into the final score. So, like I mentioned, for something like a 3 cone drill or broad jump, it might be great to have that information, but you don't necessarily want that to be worth 50% of their overall score. So, in this case, you might bump that down to be worth 0%. That way, it's just something you can reference if you need to, not something that's actually going to help determine that player's final score. Same thing for offense and defense. Those are kind of general criteria. So maybe you want to make those worth more. So bump those up to be worth 300 points. Then that will weight in 23% each versus something like a, lack sense that is important, but maybe not quite as important as defense or offense. So you can very easily customize your scoring forms and really get that final score that you need to see. And in most cases, you're able to just implement exactly what you currently do if that's what you want to do within Team Genius. You can also set up multiple days. So if players go through 3 days of tryouts, you can do that. Player pools are the age groups you can put players into so that they're only compared against players within their own age group. And then you can also add what we call eval groups. Eval groups are the groups that players go through tryouts in. So if you do have 100 players showing up to tryouts, you probably don't want that coach looking at all 100 players on one page within the app. So you can put them into group 1, group 2, group 3, and then the coaches, the evaluators themselves, can filter by that eval group so they only see the players that are right in front of them at that point. There's some additional kind of more complex features we can skip through, but I know there's a lot of people that are worried about, hey, we have some people who are parents that shouldn't see the scores. That's just fine. You can add a person in here that only has access to player check-in so that they're not going to see the scores. They're not going to be able to change setup. So there are some user permission settings. And then you can do things like hide player names for the evaluators. If you don't want the evaluators to see the player names, you can take those out very easily. You can capture profile pictures that sometimes help after a tryout. Just looking at a player's face, you're like, that's right, that player made this great play. Let's take that player. Or that was the player in the red jersey. Yeah, they were a stud. We need to put them on this top team. So that profile image capture is done in the mobile app, typically at the check-in desk, really easily streamlined into any sort of process. And then nice to have that in the TeamGenius system afterwards. For end of season evaluations, I'll just say this really quickly. It's one of our newer features. Coaches sometimes have a full-time job too, and they don't have a ton of time to give feedback at the end of the season. You can use AI now with TeamGenius to prompt AI to generate a comment based on the score you gave a player at the end of a season. So it's not always the perfect comment, but it's a really good starting point, especially for those coaches who, like me, might not be the best writer and just want a really quick button to click to generate a comment, and then you can fill in the gaps and make it more applicable to that player. You can add your players into TeamGenius by going through any of our integration partners, Sports Engine, TeamSnap, or League Apps, or you can easily add the players in through a CSV file. That's something that your account manager does walk you through, so it's not something you have to do on your own if you're not super great with CSV files. And then once you add the players in, you're able to run check-in on this page. So you type in a player's name, Skylar shows up to the check-in desk, click here, and then you can assign a number. Or in some cases, we do have a lot of organizations who pre-assign jersey numbers. If that's you, when that player gets here, Skylar Garcia, you just click here and that player is now checked in and scoreable in the mobile app. So the coaches are never going to see a player that's not actually at the tryout. You check in the player at the check-in desk, and then that player shows up in the mobile app so the coach can score them. If you do deal with walk-up players that forgot to register or registered after you did the final import, you can just go to add player right here, put them into their player pool, type in their player number and the player's information and hit save. That will then add them directly into the mobile app. So really quick and easy way to add those walk-up players who sometimes otherwise can be kind of a pain to make sure that every coach knows this new player's here, they're wearing this jersey number. It's just a lot to communicate with all those coaches who might be in different places before the tryout. After the evaluation actually happens, you'll be going to this player rankings page if you're using TeamGenius, and then you can filter by one of your age groups. We'll just look at the U10s right now. And you can see overall on day one, Jamie was our best player, 74 out of 100. So this is going to compare each player based on the scores they were given to the rest of their player pool, and then put their score on a scale of 0 to 100. And so you can easily click on each of these columns. Day one, Jamie was the best. Day two, looks like Jamie didn't do quite as well. Casey was the best there. Maybe Casey hasn't played in 2, 3 months, but looks like day two and day three ended up being one of the top players, top 1 or 2. And then far right side, that's the Team Genius score, we call it. That's the score that is combined based on all these days and is their overall score. So how do they do overall at all 3 sessions? You just go to that Team Genius score to find that out. You can also see comments on the far right side here. And then if you did want to dig more into that data, you can easily go to day one skills and see how each of those players did on each criteria. So if you want to make sure that you have a really good offensive player on each team, click that offense, and then you can see Jesse is, one of the best. There's 3 really good kind of elite offensive players. Maybe you want all 3 of those on that top team. You can also click to see which evaluator added scores. And then on the far right side here, at the end of a tryout, you're able to place them on a team. So you can easily go through, all right, our top 15 players are going to make that top team. Great. And then once we get to 16 right here, easily start putting those players on the B teams. If you need to add any columns in here as well, something like position, because you want to make sure you have a goalie on each team, you can easily go to configure table and add the column for position, and then filter by that position to place the best goalie on the A team, the second best on the B team, etc. And then if you ever need to look at an evaluator's scores to see, hey, how did this one coach score their own kid? Did they score their player as the best, even though each other coach didn't necessarily think that? You can click on their name to look at their exact scores. Or if you have somebody, Zach mentioned Zach's a lacrosse guy. Cody, maybe not as much of a lacrosse guy, or he's brand new to the sport or to the club. You can weight those scores differently within the system. That way you can get a more accurate representation of how good each of those players really are. Once those teams are placed, you can go to send emails, and you're going to see this page here where you're able to filter by the U10s. Let's say we just finished forming teams for U10s and we're ready to send out results. We'll click OK here. We then want to select the A and B team, which, as you just saw, I just placed players on that team, those teams, and then we can check this box and create a message. If you wanted to include reports to show the player, here's how you did, you could do that. Most people don't in a tryout scenario, but sending feedback reports at the end of the season works the same way. You select those teams, and then you go to the far right side here and select a template. You could have one ready for the players that you cut. You can send an email directly to the players that got cut. Or for team placement announcements, it might look something like this. It's going to use personalization tokens found right here. And it's going to say for each player, they're going to get an individual email. It's going to look like you sent it directly to them via email. Say, hey, Alex, thank you for participating in the Team Genius tryouts. We appreciate the effort and dedication you put into showcasing your skills, so on and so forth. You made this team. It's then going to drop in there that team that you placed them on the results page, U12A. And then you can put down here a link if you want to show them how they did, or if you want to say, click here to finish registrations, or respond within 24 hours to let us know that you'd like to accept a spot on the team. You can do what you want with this email. A lot of people will also add their logo down here, or even a sponsor, because this is going to go out to, Seth, in your case, maybe 800 players or so. And that's a really valuable email to add a sponsor down there. That's going to be 800 eyes that see that email and likely that sponsor logo at the very bottom, offering some exclusive deal to the nearby tire shop or something. So we see people getting really creative with those emails. You could also advertise camps or clinics that you have going on for those players who maybe got cut and need to work on a couple skills before next tryout season. So there's a lot you can do in here. This is just kind of a quick summary, but once you do click that send message, that goes out to all the players that you've selected, and it looks personalized. If they respond to it, it goes back to this email address. So you can put a coach's email address and name in there if you'd like to. So there's some flexibility on sending that out. And if you are not great at coming up with an email, telling a player they got cut, you can use our AI email generation tool as well. So you can very easily say, type me out an email that lets a player know they got cut, use sympathy, and let them know that we're looking forward to seeing them next year. You can then choose the style and the length and all that stuff, and it'll generate an email for you and place that directly in this box. So that's the TeamGenius system itself. We'll go back to the next page here. Like I mentioned, if you want to check out the mobile app itself, you can just download that on your phone or tablets and use the sample access key LAX, and that will bring you in to score some sample players. You can see if you like that for your coaches. This is just a quick preview of the mobile app. Like I've mentioned, it's totally customizable. It's available on iOS, Android, or desktop. So if you do have people who maybe run an indoor tryout, you want the coaches, evaluators to be able to connect to the internet, run an evaluation on their computer, you can do that too. You can capture video of the players going through drills. And then overall, it's just really coach friendly. We've tried to keep it as simple as possible because we know some of these coaches are old school or are brand new to the app. So it's a very simple app. And actually, we are rewriting it to add some additional features that should be launched here somewhat soon. Can't promise any dates, but we're excited for that. It's going to be a great new addition to the system. Overall, when people do switch to using TeamGenius, between the integration, the automatic data transfer, and all the other features, sending emails and whatnot, we see people that evaluate around 100 or 200 players save around 40 hours, if not much more than that. As you have more and more players that are trying out, that is absolutely a much bigger number of hours that you're saving. But that's kind of the average that we've seen from people who are evaluating around 100 to 200 players. So now we did send out that poll and got some questions to go through. Looking at the poll here, there's nothing super surprising, so we can probably skip through a lot of this. Looks like there's some summer tryouts, spring tryouts, you got some fall tryouts mixed in, wide variety of sizes of clubs. And then the overall criteria people are using, it looks like a lot of that's in line with what we were seeing in the most commonly used criteria. Offense and defense is one of those that I think people do use quite a bit in a lacrosse tryout scenario. Biggest challenges. Yeah, nothing super surprising on any of these. So we can jump to questions here. I know I had a few of them written down from the registration. Most commonly used scoring scale, we went over that. 0 to 5 half-point increments is most common, usually around 3 to 5 criteria. I would say that there's also that we've mentioned a couple times now, 0 to 6, 0 to 7 scale that people are starting to use more often. And then using TeamGenius at camps. People do use TeamGenius at camps to give feedback reports typically. Obviously, you're not usually forming teams at a camp or a combine, but people are starting to use TeamGenius much more to give feedback at the beginning of the camp and the end of a summer camp to really show, hey, you are improving. This is why you spent the money to come to our camp. So I think that's a really great use case that we don't talk about enough. And then, Seth, you kind of mentioned this too. How do you ensure there's no evaluator bias? Seems like, do you want to chime in on that just one last time?
Yeah, and just one thing I failed to mention, if you have like our clubs had anywhere from 6 to 8 to 13 teams or more, if you have multiple teams per grade, is like I said, we tried to have one coach involved in the process, but then maybe take the coaches from like the 4th and 5th grade and have them evaluate high school. The high school coaches evaluate the youth. So at least they're not familiar. our like 10th grade coaches really wouldn't know who our fifth graders are in our program. We practice high school youth. They know they're in the system, but they really wouldn't know any of those kids any differently. So kind of manipulating your own club coaches that are already in your network, just kind of jumbling them so they're evaluating grades they're not used to, was one way I have done it in the past, and one that I thought I probably should have shared.
Yeah, that's great. And it seems like one of the things too that I think most people who are running the tryout realize this, but try to have consistency across your evaluations too. Some coaches, some evaluators give a ton of perfect scores. Others give hardly any. So if you can have each evaluator scoring the whole pool, that's going to most likely lead to a much more accurate score at the end of it.
And then the only thing I would add is on day, if it's a 2-day tryout, I think there's a lot of value there. One for young men and women, sometimes they're more comfortable the second day because they know what's coming. But what we would do is meet after tryout one and be like, okay, who didn't we evaluate? Like just by happenstance, there might be a lot of kids that didn't get any evaluations at all in day one. And, if it was paper, we would highlight them, but here we would ensure that those kids get evaluated in day two. And then also the kids that were kind of, in the middle, you can start to see like, the kid that's a 5 out of a 5, like we don't need to evaluate him any further on a tryout where we're accepting kids onto a team. Like we're done, let's move on and make sure on day two, our evaluators spend all of our time on the kids maybe who missed day one, who we didn't evaluate, or the kids we have evaluated that are in that bell curve, so that we're not focusing on the kids that made it on day two, which a lot of, you don't need comments on the best kid there on day two. We already know he's the best kid there.
Yeah, exactly.
And just, and that's just advance spending the time, if you're the director, collecting back all the stuff from the coaches or asking them to take a photo, or going online now if it's online, and you searching and going, okay, who are we missing? And then getting back and say, hey, you need to score, number 121. Like no one's got any data on him. We need to get stuff on him. I remember the worst was the old days where there's like no comments, no score. The kid was there for 2 hours and it's like, how did we miss him? Like that's terrifying.
Yeah. And that's kind of a sneak peek to a feature we do have that will be live in the new mobile app. Yeah, more to come on that. But yeah, it's something that a lot of clubs deal with. They have those couple players that somehow got missed. And yeah, we want to be able to help out with that too.
Take that fear away from missing the kids, so you know for sure before you leave the field you got scores on them all.
Yeah, no, I mean that's with so many kids at our PLL junior championships, I don't have any like coaching or evaluating job. I purposely don't evaluate because I collect the data, so that way I don't have any say in any of the collection or the evaluation, but is making sure, after day one at 1:30 in the morning, I'm still like, okay, like who has not been evaluated after the first, essentially the first 2 games are played. We have 2 more to play. Like we got to get stuff on these kids.
Yeah, 100%. I think the last question too, and then we'll try to wrap it up here because I know we're over time. Seth, how do you deal with parents who might be angry about any team placement or if their kid got cut? How do you kind of handle that, but also try to steer them to come back to tryouts next year?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're not going to please 100% of any customer in any business. So the 3 to 5 to 10% of unhappy people, and in youth sports, we know that parents are as animated as any facet of their life. So just take it head on is my approach. I think for me, I was a lawyer for 20 years, so that actually was the greatest tool to help me in dealing with club lacrosse. Was not being in club lacrosse for 20 years, but was being a lawyer for 20 years. So handling customers who are upset is what you do as a lawyer. But just telling them like, look at, you may not agree with the process, but we worked really hard to make it as fair as we can. There will always be mistakes. And I'm sorry if you feel this was a mistake. The system isn't perfect, although we tried to make it perfect. we're also aware that, we may miss, and I'm sorry if you feel that is, but, and then I try to justify why, it's not a miss in this case, but, acknowledge that the system's not perfect, that it's infallible because it's based on subjective human skill. And, if we line up 10 coaches, they're going to have 10 difference of opinions on certain things. But that, I usually will then talk a little bit about my evaluators, talk a little bit about the process, why we believe it's fair, and then share something about that player, try to, do the positive sandwich that even though this player didn't make it, they were on the younger side or they were on the smaller side. And, that the goal for most, and, then maybe share in our sport, with lacrosse. And since it's connected to the PLL, say, well, does your son remember that talk from Pat Kavanaugh, who said that he was 4'11" and 95 pounds as a freshman in high school? His biology was different. It just matters. And so if your son's in 5th grade and didn't make it, like, the world's not over yet. Pat Kavanaugh was, weighing 95 pounds and 4'11" as a freshman in high school, and then remind him again, which is crazy hearing these PLL guys talk, is they all got cut. Every one of them got cut from something somewhere. And that actually was the trigger that made them great. Most of them weren't the best kid on their team their whole life. They actually got cut. And that's why they made it in the end, because they had the drive to power them through when more talented players in college kind of stopped working. That being cut in 8th grade was actually the thing that propelled them to make it.
Yeah, I've seen that firsthand, Seth. I've got a brother who plays for the Colorado Avalanche, and in
Yeah.
his journey through junior hockey, he got cut a couple times, and that's that ultimately led him to be motivated to maybe prove some people wrong or to believe in himself a bit more and go all in. So yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to remind parents if their kid does not make a team. It's not the end of the world. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
that, that can't define the rest of their career.
And, and then I will share that if the conversation's going well, if it's a back and forth, is that, the key is now is your son just learned something valuable. Whatever he's been doing might not have been enough. So whether he changes it or not is actually going to be up to him or her. But he has that opportunity. He's been given that, like, instruction manual of, like, what I was doing, like, I, wasn't enough. If this is important to me, will I do more? And you have a year till our next tryout to make it.
Awesome. I think the last question that I did want to ask quick, and I know we've talked mainly about tryouts, so feel free to steer this question in either direction, Seth, but what trends are you seeing in the lacrosse world that might be worth mentioning to anybody who's listening in?
Well, I think the talent level of the average player, it continues to be just, almost doubling every, like, 3 to 4 years. The kids are getting so good. It does become hard because there's a lot of talented kids, but the one thing that's apparent and is apparent is the size discrepancy in middle school for some kids, just the race to puberty. Certainly USA Lacrosse with the age verification has tried to, as a club, you have to decide, are you going to be strict on age verification or not? In our sport, it's still not, hockey, it's cleaner. It's not great in lacrosse. As a club, are you going to be very strict on age verification? And if not, and then abide by that. But the discrepancy in size, I think is a deterrent for some parents and frustrating. And just trying to, again, talk through that. But I feel like it's getting worse, that the bigger kids are getting bigger. And I don't know, what that is, but that's something to just address it head on as a club. We are in the age verification process, and we're not going to let a hold back, whatever the word you want to call it, in middle school, someone who should be in 8th grade playing 6th grade. Like, we're not doing that. We're just not. And we're going to follow this. And even with our own ecosystem of 25 different clubs in our group, I would say about a third honor that and a third don't, or 2/3 don't. So you just need to know that going into that club. Like, we're okay if you stayed back and you're a 7th grader playing with 6th graders. We're fine with it in our club, or we're not. But sharing that up front, I think, is really important.
Yeah, 100%. That's yeah, not something I think every sport deals with, but it's a really big issue that people do need to address. So, um, well, thank you so much, Seth, for all the insights. We'll plan to send out this recording to everyone after probably later today. We'll also get that tryout prep checklist to everyone. We'll send out this slide deck that we've been showing throughout the call today. And then if there's any questions that you do have on Team Genius specifically, feel free to send that our way. We'll add Seth's email contact information into that email as well if you do want to reach out to him with any specific questions. Sounds like he's open to any sort of topic in the lacrosse world. So feel free to lean on him as your lacrosse expert. And yeah, thank you again so much for joining. Great to see some familiar names on here, Ellen. Great to see your name, Ryan, Brandon, Cody, Alexa. Really great to have everybody joining us here today, and look forward to staying in touch here as we do progress through the summer.
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Everybody have a great day.